Welcome to Be Hero Fights. I'm Tom,
And I'm Brian.
and we are here to discuss
Or Fuss.
over two hotly debated, highly related topics.
Last week, we had our great return for season 2 of Be Hero Fights. And that fight we had was a fantastic fight between Silent Hill and Resident Evil, which is the better horror franchise.
Yes.
Movies, comic books, video games, the whole shebang. And we had our friend Mel from Melanie H Photography, which you can find her on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram under that same name, help us out with that. And you guys should definitely go right here on YouTube or on whatever podcasting platform that you have and listen to it. It was a great one.
It was so good, and it was really nice. I don't want to get too much lost into the details of it, but I feel like I feel like I finally got some justice done.
No, I don't think so. I think that it was a robbery, like us missing out on Silent Hills. It was a robbery. So,
that,
but you guys get to decide that. You guys go watch, add into the comments on that episode. Tell us what you guys think, or in the reviews, and tell us what you guys think. And of course, you guys can always hit us up on all of our social medias and let us know all the thoughts about that is. And of course, those social medias are
Facebook.com/BeHeroMedia, Instagram.com/BeHeroMedia.
right here on YouTube, of course, as well as on Twitter at Be Hero Media and Be Hero Fights, and everything that is Be Hero Media at BeHeroMedia.com, including all the great reviews we've been doing lately, such as
Spiral from the Book of Saw. I just watched that and reviewed that, and we've done quite a few. Underwater, Zack Snyder's Justice League, New Mutants. Yeah,
and it's been great. We also started a new channel, a new portion of the channel here known as Be Review, where we review movies and other things. Most recently, the one that just dropped for this, when this comes out, would be the one for Invincible, I believe. And that's a great one. You guys should totally catch that right here on YouTube as well. And you guys can also catch everything we've been doing, including Hero Plays, where we do clips as well as live gameplay with myself, Tom, his son Clark. It has been a great, fun time. If you guys haven't had a chance to watch Clark play Fortnite, that is entertaining. All the faces he has. He says almost nothing, but he goes through a range of faces that's fantastic.
yeah.
Anyhow, this week we are doing something a little bit different. Before we jump right into our fight, and this one, because the topic's going to be a little bit of a mini fight, we want to go through a list of some of the greatest ghost stories turned into movies.
Yes. Before that, though, let's go over some of the comments that we've gotten recently. From the Silent Hill vs. Resident Evil episode, as well as just from some of the mini debates that we have been posting to our Instagram and Twitter. So if you guys aren't following that, make sure you're following. We do almost every day. We have a daily debate, and so yeah, some of this is from that. First off, Anthony says, so in my opinion, you have to look at it in respective eras. Silent Hill 1, 2, 3, The Room, versus Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, and Code Veronica. In that era, so Silent Hill was the better franchise. Silent Hill Homecoming, Shattered Memories, Downpour, versus Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6. This is where Resident Evil started becoming the better franchise. It's at this point that Silent Hill pretty much has ended as well. In the end, I'd say Resident Evil is the better overall franchise, but Silent Hill is very close behind it with some better games early on. If Silent Hill went ahead with PT, Silent Hills, then I think we'd be having a very different conversation because PT blew away anything Resident Evil 7 did.
I very much agree with that statement. I think Resident Evil was fantastic, but I do think that Silent Hills would have ended the conversation just based off of the demos and everything else that was there for it, as well as Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen, so that's not a conversation we can have. That being said, 4, 5, and 6 was actually 4 4 and 5, or 5 for sure, was the weakest point for Resident Evil. Just saying that beat Silent Hill shows you how low bar those last sets of Silent Hill really was.
Well, but also Resident Evil 4 is definitely it's got the notoriety. Like it's known as being the best in the franchise. Um,
Silent Hill 2 was
but
the
but it
best in the
did but it
franchise.
did at that point also take the turn for more of the action route up until 7. Well, I mean 7 they definitely went back to horror. I think 6 was kind of between 5 and 7, obviously. But as far as like action to horror,
You mean Resident Evil, by the way, not Silent Hill.
yes, that is
Gotcha.
what I mean.
Anyhow, thank you, Anthony, for dropping that. That was a great comment. Along with that, we have another one from that Resident Evil Silent Hill. Justin states, tricky. I feel Silent Hill started better and in general was a smarter and scarier. Versus Resident Evil being pulpy. Not sure what that means. I'm guessing it means, has lots of orange juice in it. And dumb. Even today,
It's the opposite.
It's often silly. But Resident Evil even but Resident Evil proceeded to involve itself,
Improved.
whereas that's what I said, improved itself, whereas Konami drove Silent Hill, its own franchise, into the ground. And yeah, like we stated that during the episode, that just like kind of like what Justice League was done the first time around, the studios got way too involved and caused Silent Hills to franchise to just nosedive, which makes it really hard for such a great franchise to be able to recover from something like that again, as in like DC and Justice League stuff have done, has happened with Konami years, or with Silent Hill and Konami years beforehand.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So another Justin, different Justin, I believe.
I hope so. Or are you guys are really limiting down the amount of viewers who watch this?
But on one of the debates from Instagram, Uncharted versus Tomb Raider. So he said, of these two, Uncharted, although I thoroughly enjoyed and beat the Tomb Raider games, the stories are weak outside of the first one. I'm assuming you're talking about the remakes or the reboot of the franchise that started back in, what was it, 2010, I think? No, I think it was like 2013, actually.
Around, 2013.
Yeah. And yeah, the first one was phenomenal. The gameplay was great for all of them, but yeah, the story did kind of get a little lost in the weeds after the first one there. So
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Uncharted stories, as you kept going on, did have a bit of diminishing returns because of how many they kept spitting out. But I think that they ended it on a good, solid finish, so it was able to wrap it up well. Where with the Tomb Raider games, both the OG Square Boobs and the new ones, that they didn't really have a great story throughput for a lot of them. Like the new ones tried, and definitely the Rise of the Tomb Raider, which was I think was the first one.
I think it was just Tomb Raider.
Well, it was called Tomb Raider Rise, like Tomb Raider Rise of the Tomb Raider, something like that. It had a tagline, but because the other one was Tomb Raider, like Shadow of the Tomb Raider, it was something like that. I have them both. I've played them both. I just don't remember because titles didn't matter. Pixelated Jiggly Butt mattered. But that being said, they were both great games. There was more action though in the Tomb Raider over the Uncharted. But that's a fight for the future. If you guys want to see that, please hit us up in the comments, and we will probably do that in the future for you.
Yeah.
All right. And then on our last comment for the day, we have from Mechanics for Maintenance Podcast, one of our fellow podcasters out there, as states, between the God of War and the Dante's Inferno games that we posted up on, I believe, Instagram, this one was, or Facebook, one of the two, says, God of War, hands down, better play, better compelling story, and you're more invested in the characters. Dante was good, but didn't get us didn't get us
Don't get us wrong.
God, I'm having a hard time reading today, apparently. Don't get us wrong, but God of War was just more compelling and put twists that were more known for folklore. I agree with this statement as well, but I'm going to go with the thought that this is more off of the newer God of War that came out in, what was it, 2017, I think, which was a fantastic game, relevant to the Dante's Inferno game, which came out in like 2010.
Was it
Maybe
that
even
long
earlier than
ago?
that.
I don't think it was. Let me see.
It was a while ago. I
I'll look
think
it
that
up.
that one came out on the PlayStation 3, in fact. So it might have been
It
around
was, yeah. Well, yeah, it was a
2010.
360. Yeah, it was February of 2010. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember buying that game because I love the original poem that came off of.
Yeah.
Um, and that was a fun game as well, but it's a mass difference in the timeline compared to those two. Now, if you're comparing it directly to the game of the God of War games at the time, that's another fight for us to have. I keep hitting my mic.
Yeah. Yeah, if you want to hear us have that fight as well, let us know in the comments. Personally, I mean, I'm definitely on the Dante's Inferno side. God of War is great. Don't get me wrong, and I think you're right that like it is really awesome seeing that unique twist of mythology being presented there. Dante's Inferno obviously has its own unique twist of a more modern Christian mythology. But goddamn, I love it so much. It's so fun.
Yeah, it's totally a great game, and the God of War game is fantastic too. I got that game originally because I love the original God of War games, and I'm like, oh, this should be intriguing. And just playing through that game, I ate through all that. It was one of the first games in a long time that I went through and 100%ed everything on that game for the God of War, the new one that came out in 2017. It was so much fun, but that's my fight for the future. That is not what we're here to do today. Today, boys and girls, we're going to go ahead and step up to the campfire, pull up our flashlights, and try to tell the best scary story turned into a movie that we can.
That's right. 'Tis the season of bonfires, s'mores, camping, and all things out in the wilderness, which begs the question of, is it safe? Because let's be honest, the best thing to do when you're camping and you're all around the bonfire, you tell those spooky stories, the ones that make you scared to walk to your tent by yourself, or worse yet, scared to leave your tent to go to the bathroom by yourself. Uh, all these things have become such a big part of our culture, Western culture especially. Well, I mean, really any
Well,
culture,
you've
but
always
like,
said it, yeah.
yeah, it's such a big part of growing up. Let's put it that way. It's a I have nothing but fond memories of those types of conversations, and a lot of these stories have been made into films, and
Yep.
we wanted to kind of talk about that. Before we get too deep into that, let's go ahead and introduce who we have with us today.
Yeah. So first, you guys know her, you love her, a regular on the show, and you actually get to see her lovely face this time. Once again, everyone, say hello to Dani.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing
So
fantastic,
good.
Dani. Loving having you here. And of course, Dani does all of our merchandise for us, which is going to be available on our website at BeHeroMedia.com. So all that lovely merchandise you see there, that's all Dani's hard work. So please, please buy some stuff to make it worth, she's a single mom. She needs all the help she can get.
And so do we.
Yeah, that too. All right. And happily, you can't see his lovely face. We have Pat with
we
us
wish
as
we
well.
could, though.
Hello, Pat.
Oh, you can't see my face. I'm giving you another scowl. But, yeah.
I am happy every day we can see your face. I mean, I love you.
I'm disappointed that we can't see his face, but yeah, welcome back, Pat. Longtime friend of the show. You've been with us on a few episodes before. We've always enjoyed having you.
Yes,
You
yes.
say that.
More importantly, have
I
you gotten
also
Disney
mean
Plus
it.
yet?
Have I what?
Have you bought Disney Plus yet?
Yes, I have Disney Plus.
Yay! We did it. Disney, you owe us. Disney, you need us to,
Give us a
be a
kickback.
sponsor. Yeah, sponsor. Anyhow,
It's only
bringing
like
this
$15. If you're looking for a Disney sponsorship, you're gonna have to push it a lot harder than that, guys.
Oh,
You got,
I
you got
promise
one
we will.
sub.
Anyhow, all this tonight for the ghost stories and everything else, besides being, with the timing of camping and everything else. And then, of course, we're recording this during Memorial Day weekend, which is the beginning of summer for most people. It is also about to be the beginning of a horror movie resurgence, I believe, with the Conjuring 3 about to come out. I believe it's called The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It.
Yes.
James Wan's been fantastic with these Conjuring series, and of course, all the Conjuring series are based off of true scary stories that were brought to us by the Warrens, who you see in the movie, as well as the stories of their between like the Nun and Annabelle and everything you see in the first couple Conjuring movies. All of that stuff is because of stuff that happened with the Warrens and the stories they tell because of that.
Yeah.
And in that same vein, we want to continue that trend of telling stories of, or talking about movies that have based off the stories like that. So, what do we got to start off with us for today, Tom?
Well, in honor of that, I wanted to do a super deep cut. This hasn't been made into a movie, but it is an urban legend nonetheless, and it's one that affected anyone from the days of MySpace and the early days of the interwebs. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if anyone remembers these, but there was a time back in the days where you would get those horrific chain emails. I remember there was this story that there was this girl who had a roommate, and she came home late from from a party one night, and she was in college, and she heard dripping in the shower in the bathroom, so she didn't go in there. She's like, whatever. Like, it was just the light was on, and she started dripping sound, just slow, steady dripping. She was like, all right, just go to bed. Goes to bed, gets up the next morning. The dripping is still kind of going on, and like the bathroom light is still on. She's not sure what happens. Anyways, she opens the door, and her roommate has been killed, and the dripping sound was blood, dripping out of her body into the tub. And then the best part of said urban legend was it said, if you don't forward this to 5 people, aka put this on 5 people's walls on MySpace, the same person that killed this lady is going to come kill you. There's been a million of those types of things, whether it's bad luck or death or whatever. It's definitely the reason why I've had the worst string of bad luck in the last 5 years, I'm sure, because of my early MySpace days.
8 years.
But it wouldn't be right to talk about urban legends without bringing up that nonsense.
Well, and urban legends go way past that. Like, you have old school ones of like the Hookman and he's in the back seat, and like so many ones. They
That's
they
why I
did
could not drive home in the dark for years.
That's right. You have the gang one with the lights off. So yeah, like they did a bunch of these in the movie back in the late '90s, early 2000s called Urban Legends, which allows you to get tied into where like a gang one where like gangbangers supposedly would drive up and down the road on the freeways in California and have their lights off. And if you flash your lights on them to say, "Hey, your lights are off in the middle of the night," they would follow you, ram you off the road, and kill you. I don't remember ever hearing if anything actually was true of any of that statement outside of like original statement. But once that urban legend started coming around, people would do that as a prank, would purposely do that and just chase people down and stuff like that. But there's a ton of urban legends of that style around. And then, of course, the internet created versions of the similar thing known as creepypastas. And most people know of probably the most famous one, Slenderman, where you are, you're in the forest or you're walking like camping or something like that, and you see the Slenderman nearby. And then when you come home, you start seeing him outside your house and all that stuff. There are versions of that story all over the place.
Yeah.
But there are stories like these kind of stories as urban legends have a very loose basis in realities of similar things like that. But what we're talking about today are movies that are based off of quote unquote true stories. One I have for us to start off with is the story of the Winchester House. This one was actually recently brought, I think it was 2017, 2018, as a movie. that was fantastically portrayed, uh, as the character Sarah Winchester was portrayed by Helen Mirren. Did a fantastic job in it. It's super scary. If you haven't watched it, you should totally go through. But the basis is dealing with again Sarah Winchester. She's the widow of John Winchester, who created the Winchester repeating rifle and the Winchester Gun Company. So shortly after the Civil War, um, she after he died, she moved into a house known as Winchester Manor, or the Winchester House, and she was constantly like having things done to it to be weird, like putting secret passages, making making rooms that doors that didn't go anywhere, and things like that, and constantly working on having rooms that were like sealed off. And the reason being is she felt that all of the victims of the guns that or the people killed by her family's guns were haunting her, and as long as she made it hard for the ghosts to find her and to follow through the house, that she wasn't going to be haunted. And the story does really well, and again Helen Mirren is amazing in the movie. And the story is it's an interesting concept to think that um, your family's legacy is death, so as such you're being haunted as punishment for it. All the money that you have that you're able to do all this stuff with is essentially blood money.
Yeah.
So
Is this the
Yeah.
place in California?
yes,
Yes.
and if you
They
haven't been
made
there,
another movie about it. Well, it's a Stephen King book, but Rose Red, probably one
Yep.
of my favorite horror movies ever.
I think that's the one I've seen, yeah.
Yeah, Rose Red is based off of it. Stephen King had gone to the home there and did it. You can go do tours of the Winchester House and stuff, but you can
Mhm.
only go to parts of it because of the big San Francisco earthquake in 1906. I think it was 1906 or 1916. Did a ton of damage to it because
Yeah, I
obviously
remember
that
that.
house was built in the 1800s and was not earthquake prepped. So
Yeah.
Well, and there are a lot of doors that lead to nowhere, like
Yeah,
drop off from the second floor, and
yeah,
Yeah.
but I
but
remember this. It was so cool.
there's tons of stories like that.
isn't there a room that's like built upside down?
Yeah, there's
Mhm.
rooms built upside down. There are rooms they're still finding, like as they go through, especially after the earthquake. A bunch of the rooms were destroyed, so there are rooms that they're still excavating and finding. That place is massive, but there are sections of the manor that you can go through as part of the tour and see things. So
Yeah.
if you guys get a chance, do it. Hit us up in the comments if you've been there or are going to there, and tell us what you think.
Yeah. Exactly. I didn't know that we were supposed to do true stories made into horror movies. I thought the concept is urban legends, so that's what I'm prepared with.
Well, hit us up
Um,
with some more urban legends then.
yeah. So I want to talk about Hatchet Harry. I don't know if you've heard about that, but there's many versions of the legend. Some of them, one in particular that I remember hearing growing up was Hatchet Harry was a guy, not super together. He was fishing and the fish was good, and he ran out of bait, and so he started cutting off his fingers, and to for more bait and to keep fishing, and eventually got to the point where he gouged out his eyes, and he did all this with a hatchet, and eventually he ends up accidentally killing himself for the sake of fish. And I remember hearing the story around campfires at scouts, and the whole thing was like, watch out for Hatchet Harry, he's coming to cut off your fingers and ears and eyeballs so that he can keep fishing because the fish is good.
I mean,
And I huh
so there's a serious problem with it. Like, I honestly am not afraid of a guy who thinks it's better to cut off your fingers, gouge out your eyes, and whatever else to catch a fish. Like,
when you're
obviously
12
he doesn't have the mental capacity to handle any real world situation. So
when, when you're
plus he doesn't have
12
eyes, so you can just like if you remain quiet and somewhat behind a tree, he'll never find you.
He's not a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
He's got no eyes though.
He's
You just don't
undead.
understand.
He's how the undead work.
I'd like wait.
And
I'd also point out we were raised in opposite churches, and yours being the better church. I never heard any bad stories, any bad stories when I went to summer camps and All church activities, never once heard bad stories.
Well,
Oh
you
wow,
know,
That
this is the
out.
first.
boys.
Usually it's Tom that's the sheltered one, not you.
Right? I never heard bad stories. I
Oh
did
man,
plenty of other things with these people
that's
that,
an
afterwards
episode for another time.
about
that
drinking and
Go
drugs, but
on.
there are other versions of Hatchet Harry, and one of them was used for the franchise Hatchet, um, which is about Victor Crowley out in the what is not Florida, New Orleans. The time frame, what is it? Words are hard right now. What is the big festival in February in New Orleans?
Mardi Gras.
Mardi Gras. There we go. Yes, Mardi Gras. During Mardi Gras. Anyways, it's an urban legend from out there. And Victor Crowley is a young deformed kid who was killed by a hatchet on accident by his father while his house is burning down. It's one of those tragic urban legend stories. And then Victor Crowley's spirit or whatever comes back and he kind of haunts these swamps and kills people. If you haven't seen the Hatchet movies, holy cow! They are amazing. They are so much better than I expected. I remember actually looking over them for the longest time, just been like, whatever. It's just like a Friday the 13th knockoff. And while there is maybe a little bit of truth to that, um, honestly, it is so good. I would dare say it is more entertaining than the Friday the 13th. Um, it is scary, it is violent, it is gory, it is hyper violent, it is really good, but it's also very self-aware, and I think that's where it kind of takes the cake. It's just very self-aware versus Friday the 13th takes itself a little too seriously until some of the later movies. Anyways, so Hatchet Harry, that was one that I wanted to bring up.
So I've got two more to bring up real fast before we go into our fight. One, and this just popped in my head because of you talking about Hatchet and being in New Orleans. I don't know if it's been to a movie yet. I believe it is, or if it's not, it's in development. But it's about the Axemen of New Orleans. If you've never heard of the story of this, in the 1800s, early 1900s, I can't remember which one it was, but literally a guy was going through homes and using the residents' own axes and killing people in their sleep. And he killed like 6 or 7 people, and then he randomly sent a letter to the newspaper, claiming to be the Axeman, and saying that anybody that plays jazz at night will not be killed. And so, literally that night, everybody in New Orleans played jazz at home, and nobody died that night. And in fact, they really haven't seen the Axemen since that point,
Yeah.
which I think is a fantastic story of that.
Doesn't
But
American Horror Story cover that?
I think so. I think they did a version of that.
Yeah.
But I fell out of that show pretty quickly. So, uh, but the last one I wanted to bring up before we get into the fight, unless you have any more, Tom.
Go for
Okay,
it.
is probably one of the most famous movies of all time, but you may not realize it's based somewhat off of a true story. So in the 1970s, um, in Southern California is where this first started. A Laotian man was asleep and just started screaming in pain, and his wife was next to him and tried to wake him up, but he would not wake up, and he would not wake up, and then he died in his sleep. And when the coroner was trying to figure out what was going on, all they can tell was stress to his heart. This is what killed him, and he not thought nothing of it. And then a little while later, a similar scenario: man screaming in his sleep in pain, couldn't be woken up, and died. And then when the coroner looked it over, saw again it was just stress damage to the heart, and it was like, that is odd. Two Laotian men, or Southern Asian men, excuse me, because the other gentleman was not from from Laos. Um, both had the same thing, and they could not figure out what the connection between them outside of that. So he thought maybe like orange, the some of the chemical stuff from the Vietnam War, um, Agent Orange is what I was thinking. But he ruled that out because that became a toxic thing. And then he started looking up and reaching out to other corners, and they started seeing similar things across the country with Southern Asian men that are recent refugees to America from Southern Asia. And eventually, over time, the CDC finds out that it's a genetic deformity in some men where they have a version of an arrhythmia in their heart that would kill them. And when you're sleeping, your heart is at such a rest that that's when it was more prominent. Well, a director, and at the time he only had one big film known as Last House on the Left, had saw this in the report and decided to make a movie of it. That director was Wes Craven. And the movie that he based that off of is Nightmare on Elm Street. That's right. Freddy Krueger is based off of a true story.
Possibly the greatest horror franchise of all
Very
time.
much, very much.
Definitely my favorite. But I'm that silly person that likes gore and quip, and that just hits both marks for me.
Yeah.
But with that being
Because
said,
it's weird.
I do actually. I forgot. There is one more that I had written down. I forgot about it.
Okay.
It's, and I feel bad because it's certainly not as epic. Well, okay, this is epic for Japanese culture. This is probably just as influential in Eastern Asian culture. And the legend is, and they did make a movie for this, but it's Kuchisake, or Kuchisake Anna, which is the slit-mouthed woman, and it's a woman who basically she had her face cut open, kind of like the Joker, if you will.
Why so serious?
Yes, exactly. It was cut open, and then I guess so. The town that she haunts, if you will, she goes up often to children or young men and says, "Am I beautiful?" And if they say no, she kills them. If they say yes, she takes off her mask, revealing her cut face, and asks them again. And if they say no, she kills them. If they say yes, then she cuts their mouth. In very much in the same way. So, haunting, terrifying story, and based on a popular myth or urban legend in Japan. Supposedly, there is some story that may or may not have happened with that, as most urban legends are based, with a shred of truth to them. Yeah, that was the last one that I wanted to bring up. So
That'd be an interesting story right now, like to change to a modern time, especially recently after or as this pandemic is finishing up, to
Yeah.
have as a thing since everybody and their dog are wearing masks.
yeah,
It'd be a great time for a scenario of that.
right.
Yeah,
Agreed.
that's a future screenplay by Be Hero Media.
Yes.
All right.
I'm out.
Well, guys, so we're gonna go ahead into our mini debate. So what we're gonna do is debate what is the best movie based off of a true story, true ghost story.
Urban legend.
Urban legend, all one and the same. So, with that being said, Tom, which one did you choose?
So I went with Candyman, which is based off of not one, but two urban legends, brought together in the most beautiful way, which I will discuss in a moment.
And I went with what is arguably the scariest ghost story of all time. I know when this movie came out, people left screaming from the theater, my grandmother being one of them. The Exorcist.
Or, since Brian's a wrestler, the Suplexorcist.
Yes.
That was a funny meme, though, right?
I enjoyed it. So, all right, guys. So, what we're going to do for this mini debate is we'll just go through our normal steps quickly. So, we'll have our opening round where we'll talk about them, our second round, which is the fight, and then the final round. And Danny and Pat will decide how this is going to end. All right, guys. So, let's go ahead and have Tom start. Tom, tell us about Candyman.
Round one. Fight!
Candyman is a wonderful franchise. The first film is phenomenal. The second film is decent as well. It definitely, kind of goes on its own little path, but, we're talking about the first film, Candyman. Candyman is incredible. Like I said, it's based on two urban legends. The first being Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary, everyone has heard some form of the legend of Bloody Mary. In fact, my first instance.
Dude, what the hell? You've already said both names like 3 times. Like, there's gonna be Candyman or Bloody Mary appearing behind you.
Candyman!
To be fair, he has to say Candyman 5 times. So.
Oh, sorry.
I'm not saying either name at all.
So, anyways, Bloody Mary, famous urban legend. My actual first time hearing this legend didn't. The person telling it to me didn't say anything about Bloody Mary. He just referred to it as witches. But I've heard different versions of this. Bloody Mary is a really interesting phenomenon, and this is an actual phenomenon that happens. And what it is if you go into the bathroom, you do some low lighting. Usually, you do like a candle or whatever, but just really low lighting. You stare in the mirror and you say, "I believe in Bloody Mary."
You didn't ever just turn off the lights and crack the door and let
that's fine. That'll work too. You got to set the mood though, Dani. Set the mood with the candles. Anyways,
the way I always brought a girl to the bathroom was light some candles and some bubble baths. So
I
wasn't allowed to play with matches when I was little.
Anyways, you chant that 3 times. Bloody Mary appears in the mirror. There is actual science behind this. This is a really fun experiment that you can do on your own. You will not die. You will be fine. I've done it. It's creepy. It's kind of fun. But you will see a face that is not necessarily your own, but it is actually what it is. Because of the limited light, your brain, limited light creates limited data going into your eyes, so your brain makes up the data on its own naturally and tries to make a face out of basically nothing and puts it where your head is. When you tell the story right and you've set the mood, it's absolutely terrifying. So that's the first legend. The other one is the Hook Man, which was alluded to earlier in this episode. The Hook Man, story, basically, a couple driving home, making out in the car or whatever. They hear something. The boyfriend goes out of the car and has the girlfriend wait inside, and then the girlfriend hears stuff happening on the car. She finally goes out, and her boyfriend is dead above the car, and blah 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 blah, killed by a man with a hook on his hand. Which Candyman is that? He has a hook for a hand. It's a terrifying movie, but it's also a very well done movie. While it is dated, it is an incredibly effective horror movie that will really make you think about a lot of things. The cultural significance of urban legends, of what's the word that I'm looking for? Not like racial disparities, but just like things that you'll find, cultural diversities from the inner city versus the out, right? It's very interesting. It's a very interesting dive into that kind of thing. Anyways.
And you're not wrong. I mean, Candyman's a fantastic movie, and of course, Tony Todd is perfect for that role, and his voice is amazing in that. And those two urban legends are probably the two most popular urban legends, so it's a great way to mix those two together and to make something special as a horror movie for an urban culture.
Yeah.
But we're going up against probably the greatest ghost storied movie of all time. Kind of not the OG, but like the one that kind of puts the concept on the map, and that is The Exorcist. Was originally a book, then became a movie. And the story of The Exorcist is the story of based off of an actual exorcism that was supposedly done by a child known as Roland Doe or Robbie Moynihan or Manahan. They kind of changed the name of the original story, or the original kid, to protect him, but he was a 14-year-old boy who him and his aunt, who he was very close to, used to play with a Ouija board. And after she had died, he was very upset and would still try to play with the Ouija board. And it was said that he was trying to reach out to his aunt to still talk to her using it. and was possessed because of him looking for that. So he wasn't possessed by his aunt, he was possessed by a demon, but the demon's point of access was because he was so sad and depressed. He was open to possession because he was looking for his aunt. And that story, of course, was adapted and changed into a fantastic story with Linda Blair playing the main character instead of the boy and everything else. Uh, it was so good. It came out in 1971, and as I said, when it first came out, it literally had people throwing up in the theater and leaving. My grandmother saw that when she was a young child and left the theater halfway through. To this day, she needs to have a nightlight in the or in the hallway at her house because she is terrified of being in the dark. Um, Mind you, my grandmother is a very superstitious Hispanic woman, but nevertheless, it is a thing that has been done.
Do we have
I
the
tried
same
watching.
grandma?
Yeah, I tried watching that movie once at the house when I was living there because I grew up with my grandparents, and she refused to let me watch it while she was home. I had to wait until she was gone to be able to watch that movie because it still to this day terrifies her. It is the scariest movie to her of all time, and for a lot of people, it is. Um, so that's what Candyman will be going up against today. All right, guys. So
Sorry, because I've never seen The Exorcist. I
Oh
just
my!
am curious about the movie. Do they
Were you raised Amish? Like you weren't? You didn't ever tell ghost stories around the fire. You weren't allowed to play with matches. You haven't seen The Exorcist.
Okay.
I mean,
I wasn't allowed to play with matches. I played with matches. Uh, we told ghost stories. I was fucking afraid with. Sorry, I was afraid of everything. You can ask Tom. I still don't like scary movies.
It's
I
true.
don't
I've
like
tried
it.
so hard to get her to watch them with me. She won't do it.
I like I have no problem. Brian and Tom both know. I think you know. I have ghosts that live in my house. I have no problem with the ghosts. I don't like scary movies. Okay, Exorcist. Do they portray the girl as the same as the boy where she plays with the Ouija board and that's
yes,
what happened?
so in that one, she finds an old Ouija board in the basement in the house they just moved into,
Okay.
and that's where she finds is possessed by the demon Pazuzu.
Is it
Um,
it's not her aunt though, it's some other
no, no,
okay.
in this one, it's not due to a loss in the family or anything else
Okay.
like that.
Sorry, I
But the
just wanted
original
to make
story
sure.
is based off that. Yeah. Um, there's a lot of it too that they go into. Like if there's a book out there that compares the original story to this, and people went and found the original Exorcist to who did the exorcism, and talks about how he compares it to the original thing. And his like one major thing is, yeah, there was no throwing up.
there was a movie that I saw recently that I can't remember the title of, but it was basically this same story.
Mhm.
Probably made in like 80 in the 80s.
Well, there was a movie that came out just not too long ago that was supposed to be the true version of the Exorcist. It was the exorcism of somebody or
Emily
another.
Rose?
No, that's a different one. That's another based on true
Yeah.
story one.
I've seen
But
clips of that one, but I have not seen the full.
yeah, that one was more to deal with a trial because
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
Exorcist was on trial for allowing this girl to die,
Yeah.
essentially. So. But yeah, so that
Sorry.
was round one, everybody.
I tried.
So we're gonna go ahead and go into round two now, where me and Tom will argue back and forth about why one's better than the other. Tom, start us off.
Round 2. Fight!
So, the first thing that I got to point this out, and it's don't get me wrong, The Exorcist is a very effective and incredibly well done horror film. Um, for the most part, I would say it holds up just easily as much as Candyman. It's definitely more terrifying than Candyman. But here's my problem with the whole thing. Fucking Ouija board, man. Are you kidding me? You're talking about that game made by Hasbro Games and Hobbies? What are they doing? Going to hell and kidnapping demons and custom installing them into these boards. We guarantee a haunted house in 2 weeks or less, or your money back. You're kidding. No. The original Ouija board, the original Ouija board was invented July 1st of 1890 and was popularized and became a part of, it was a parlor game.
There's no other spirit board.
Then you were raised by the right church.
Yes.
Apparently, Ouija boards.
It was literally made for a gimmick game shop. It's literally like, that's like saying the magic 8-ball caused me to kill someone. Like, no, it doesn't freaking work that way. There is also science behind how the Ouija board and why the Ouija board works, and it's really interesting. If you haven't looked it up, you need to go look it up. It's interesting. So again, like, the Ouija board, like, that's so dumb. It's so cliche. I freaking hate that.
Okay, why is it cliche though? It was so The Exorcist originated the concept, 1, and 2. The original version of the Ouija board was known as the spirit board, which came during the time of the spiritualist, which was in the late 1800s, and it wasn't directly made by a game company, but it was made. No, the Ouija board was not the spirit board. Yeah. Slightly different. The spirit boards were done for spiritualists and mediums to use. And yes, they were parlor games, but that doesn't mean anything. A doll was created as Robbie, which was a doll that was possessed by somebody, a doll, or Annabelle. They have different things. It doesn't take, like, you can get anything to be possessed by something to cause you to be open to that possession in these kind of stories.
According to Wikipedia, the Ouija board was regarded as an innocent parlor game unrelated to the occult until an American spiritualist, Pearl Curran, popularized its use as a divining tool during World War I. 30 years later, it was
the Ouija
not.
Board was.
There was nothing.
Board, which was slightly different, but the same.
No.
Edited it. The Wikipedia.
Yeah. Good job, Tom, editing Wikipedia again. But no, like so look it up. Not Ouija specifically. Don't look up the Ouija board. Look up a spirit board.
Boards. I know exactly.
And they did have those. They did have those in the late 1800s during the big wave of spiritualism. And Pearl did use that as part of her parlor trick to doing things because she was a well-known medium. She also did things where she was, after she died, that she was having people write like things for her. Or, I'm sorry, reverse that. She was using the Ouija board at the time to write stories and stuff like that that was supposedly written by somebody she was listening to through the Ouija board. That's where that popularization came from. But there were spirit boards before that.
I'm looking it up. There weren't. There were. Google it. Google it.
I found
the Ouija board came first, and it was during World War I that someone turned it into the spiritual occult phenomenon that it is today, 30 years after its creation.
Well, that's when it was patented. Like, there's a difference between something being invented and it being patented, but this article is suggesting that Ouija dates back to 540 BC. Take that for what it's worth.
But again, there are records out there of people using spirit boards during the beginning of spiritualism. But the one that you're referencing with Pearl is the most popular story of that because she became so popular with the story she wrote by using a Ouija board to have a ghost help her write the stories. That all being said, you're fighting on behalf of urban legends. So you're yelling at me about something that may or may not be real or is, corporate, propaganda. It's an urban legend, bro. It's literally things.
A Ouija board is just as urban of a legend as Bloody Mary. It's based on just as much of a scientific phenomenon, and it's just as silly. However, Bloody Mary is far more terrifying because it's something that you actually get to see when you experience it. The Ouija board doesn't work as a solo game. Bloody Mary does. Ouija board, you have to have multiple people working because it works off of a collective conscious with micro movements. And Bloody Mary, you don't need anyone. You psych yourself out, you go look in the mirror, low lighting, and you will see your face change
So
in the most horrifying way.
let's
Now,
take out your aspect right now of the Ouija board, right? Take that out of the movie. The movie is basically about possession and the removal of the possession, or the person being possessed, having this demon be removed. That concept has been around since civilization, or even before that, right? So that's what the basis in the story and the whole crust of The Exorcist is that story. So how they get there may have been fictionalized or whatever with the Ouija board, but you could have used anything. I mentioned before about Robbie and Annabelle the dolls. You could have had both of those, and those are store bought items just the same as the Ouija board.
I mean, yes,
Now,
I guess you could dare say that it's kind of the same because Bloody Mary is an entity that is you invite in that possesses the home and hunts you down and kills you. Not in quite the same way that a demon does in The Exorcist, but yeah. So I guess they are very, very similar concepts. I think I just feel like I don't know. Bloody Mary is more terrifying. Like the I guess on the one hand, with The Exorcist, there is an element of naivety, um, where like I guess picks up the Ouija board and just starts playing with it, unbeknownst, not knowing, not expecting, and so it was that innocence that invited the demon in. Whereas if you're playing Bloody Mary, like there's no innocence. You say Candyman in front of the mirror 5 times. There, you're not innocent. You are summoning a demon, and then said demon is hunting and stalking you. Um, which I think is it definitely plays well to like the more classic horror genre. Um, there's a Greek story of a guy who was hunting in the wilderness, and he comes across a goddess who's taking a bath, and he sees her and doesn't say anything, and she notices him, and she curses him and turns him into a stag. Or actually, curses him and says, "If you open your mouth to speak ever again, you'll turn into a stag." And inevitably, he opens his mouth. He's turned into a stag, and he's eaten by his own hunting dogs. Again, the idea and one of the I guess the ancient concepts of horror is it's a consequence to your action, and there is a little bit that you can do to postpone the inevitable. Um, but in the end, that's the point of horror: is you messed up and you will pay for your sins.
well, with The Exorcist, you get that same concept. So The Exorcist largely is based with the Catholic religion, right? And in the Catholic religion, spirit boards at this point, whether they're Ouija or some other version of a spirit board, were looked as not to be used because they're a path towards Satan.
Mhm.
And so essentially, what Roland and Linda Blair's character in The Exorcist, who name escapes me, and I feel like I should know it, but they are both are playing with these Ouija boards as Catholics, knowing that it's a portal to hell. So yes, there's an innocence of a child just playing with essentially a game board like it's Monopoly. But if you ever played Monopoly, you know how much of a hell a game that is. But
Let the record state that Catholics also said Dungeons and Dragons was going to open a portal to hell, and yet billions of people play that regularly and never have a problem.
I have
Same
never
Well, that's
for
because
people
they're
playing
not
the
playing
Ouija
it right. Obviously.
never heard that one.
But yes, oh, and that one was in the early '80s that the Dungeons and Dragons were going to corrupt our children and send them to hell. But so you have a similar thing where their actions are the consequence to their action is them being possessed. But even that with possessions, you have possessions of all varieties of things for doing horrible sin, of all kinds of things that may cause an innocent person to become that. Almost all of the Salem witch trials are due to a version of possession or deals with the devil because of an action that women have took in that time. So you have things that are based in strong reality, quote unquote, to these people doing an action and their consequence is this. And as a Catholic person, again, my grandmother was a very strong Catholic. Um, she is terrified of it because they are taught so strongly to be afraid of demons. The demons are everywhere and they're trying to possess you. You must stay on the righteous path to be protected. So when you see something like The Exorcist, as a Catholic person or a highly religious person, that is literally something in that you're taught could easily happen if you don't stay in the path of righteousness. Unlike the Candyman, which is an urban legend, is hard to go with. Like the Bloody Mary stories, some version of the Bloody Mary stories have been around for centuries.
Yeah.
Even before it was Bloody Mary, it was something similar. They have stories of reflections all over the place. There's even a version of the Narcissus story that's from Greek mythology that is similar to a Bloody Mary story. And that's in the Greeks storyline or Greek mythology.
Yeah.
But you have something that is easily seen by multiple religions. Even in the Muslim religions, they have versions of possession, things like that, that they tell stories of.
Yeah.
Old Testament have it. So you see that as essentially what's true. Pretty much, if you have the strong religious belief in God and heaven and everything else, hand in hand, you have belief in possession, which means that's something that could legitly happen. And as Danny stated earlier, people strongly believe in ghosts, herself included, that is at any point in time could have some effect on you. So, though Candyman is a fantastically scary movie, and the concepts of Bloody Mary and the Hookman are scary stories to tell around the campfire and everything else, or have a bunch of your friends over for a sleepover and mess with them due to facial pattern recognition in low light. This stuff, as a religious person, is truth. Like possession is truth, which is the core bit of what The Exorcist is.
I'm like so nodding my head because I know you were so much more religious than I am, Tom. And it's like Brian and I just had a heart to heart.
I was.
Thought.
Go ahead.
I was like, really quick, finish up your thought. We'll ask these two if we have questions, and then we'll do a final thoughts.
Yeah. Look, like, and Danny's right. I did grow up way more religious than anyone alive. And you know, you're right. Like even in the Mormon religion, you know, possession is a very real thing. In fact, I remember being taught as a child that if you ever met someone that you assumed was, you know, an entity, if you will, you could ask it to shake your hand, and if it was an angel that didn't have a body, it would just say no. If it was a demon, it would try to shake your hand to trick you, but your hand would pass right through. And if it was a otherwise messenger of God, if it was like a, you know, other being then that had a body, then that was also safe and it would shake your hand. Anyways, I felt the need to say that because that's how they
taught that as well.
Yeah, that's how they taught us to protect ourselves from demons, basically. So
that explains so many handshakes and so much, you know.
The Mormons love their handshakes, man.
Oh, for sure.
They got like 7 different awesome handshakes.
Yeah.
You got handshakes.
Secret passwords.
Here's the thing. At this point, and there are many people that are going to be on similar pages. So yes, you know, if you are religious, deep religious, quasi-religious, there are a lot of people that are going to fall into this realm where something like possession is true. But for me, and I would dare say for the majority of the human population at this point, it is in the realm of urban legend. It cannot be substantiated by any scientific basis or any facts. It's all hearsay, and that's the approach that I'm taking to it now. So if you come at it with that mindset, a hearsay story of someone freaking out because they were possessed, well, maybe they were just nuts. Whereas anyone can go in their bathroom, turn off the lights, and talk to Bloody Mary and scare the crap out of themselves and see something absolutely horrifying. And the fact that we have a incredibly well done movie that talks about, you know, that brings that up, brings up that urban legend, talks about the mythos on how that affects people, but also how legends like this can arise in lower demographic communities and how that can affect the surrounding area. It's so incredibly well done. It's so much more relevant to everyone because it talks about social systems, the class warfare, and everything like that. It's just, I think it's smarter, and it falls into that same realm of urban legend, and it's terrifying, and again, anyone can experience it.
Again, it is very true in that statement. Anybody can go through and see a slasher film of any kind, and then also go with the concept of the creation of a mythos, which is the strong portions of what Candyman is. But we have ingrained in us this instant fear of the dark, right? And you get that a bit with the Bloody Mary story, but the concept of possession, the concept of not being able to control your own body because you made a poor choice, you did not follow the righteous path. That concept is an ingrained fear in everybody, whether you're religious or not. If everyone, they've done polls where they show that a majority of the world still believe in some version of a ghost, right? And demons and things like that, whether they're religious or not. And you just imagine that is a possibility that you could be possessed by a ghost, a poltergeist, a demon, and you have no control over your actions. You're throwing up pea green soup. You're stabbing yourself with a cross in places that no one should ever stab a cross into. You're lifting off the bed. Those are natural fears in the world. There are two fears that everyone's born with. They're the fear of heights and the fear of loud noises. But a third one arises for most people fairly quickly, and that's the fear of the dark. And you get a fear similar like that of being in the dark by being possessed, and you get that through The Exorcist. The Exorcist shows you what this little girl goes through. Regan, that's her name. Regan goes through the movie and everything that they have to do, but not just her. You see a side story of the young priest dealing with the loss of his mother and how that affects him in that story, and the old priest trying to teach him what it is to deal with exorcism, what the tragedy that the mother goes through, to see her daughter go through all of this. You see all of this in the span of an hour and a half long movie in 1971. Okay, that is how good this movie is. This movie still holds up as relevant today because of the fears that we have. But with all that being said, I think it's time, unless you two have questions, to go into final thoughts.
Just a
Questions?
comment. I think when I eventually get a webcam, I'm going to get a big sign printed that says citation required for that whole bunch of bull you just spouted.
First of all, none of that was BS. But in fact, that's probably the most truthful thing I've ever said on this podcast.
When you said it was an hour and a half or whatever, and I was like, I feel like we've been here for an hour and a half with you talking.
An hour and 2 minutes, but thank you. Ow, Danny. I am entertaining, motherfuckers. All right. Anyhow, let's go. Let's go into final thoughts. Tom.
Final round. Fight!
All right, final thoughts. You know what? Exorcisms, I'm just going to come out here and say it. That horse has been beaten to death. I'm sorry. There's a gajillion exorcism movies. At this point, we're still getting them. And what are they now? It's like, oh, all the other ones have been fake. But what if, finally one was real? There's been like 4 of those now. And the newest one coming out is another one. Like, come on. I'm sick of it. People don't buy into that story anymore. It's bullcrap. Again, Candyman is a relevant story because it hits so many different nuances with culture, with class warfare, with an actual scientific phenomenon for what you see in the mirror in low light and what you can experience. It's an incredibly well done. It also goes one step further and shows the cultural impact in how a community can be affected by an urban legend and how people might start to pay homage and worship and try to find ways to appease said demon to protect themselves from it, which you don't get in any sort of Exorcist movie with anything other than like, the power of Christ compels you. Run away from this squirt bottle and a plastic cross I cut out of my jeans. It's just, I don't know, man.
Why did you
Like,
get plastic out of jeans?
shut up. It didn't make sense.
Yeah,
I'm aware of that. Okay, fine, but the point stands.
I mean,
Was
the
it?
movie came out in 1970, so I can kind of understand how there's plastic in jeans, but
Okay, I'll give you that.
and you
Pulled
said
out
the
of my
stuff
jeans.
I
Not
just
pulled out of my
stuff-
jeans, not cut out. Pulled out. Pulled it out of my pocket. Shut up.
Why you said
God.
that?
You guys just got on me for the bullshit I spout.
Did not.
I mean, we're being fair here. Danny said what I was thinking, but yeah, I mean, we're not
So-
letting go. We're not letting him get away with the whole I pulled a cross or I made a cross out of my jeans.
A plastic cross out of denim.
Parachute denim sheets. Jeans.
Oh, that being said,
you guys feel free to comment below how much of an idiot I am. It's fine.
or if you ever had jeans that were made of plastic.
Yes, someone please save me. Just justify what I just said somehow.
No. Not only do they have to have jeans made of plastic, they had to have made a cross out of said jeans.
We walked
All right.
through.
With all that being said, my final thoughts are simple. The Exorcist made in 1970 was not the original Exorcist style or possession style of movie, but is the most famous of all of them. Although the trope has continued, that one is the original. There's a reason that they are been made so many after that is because of how well The Exorcist was done. The Exorcist also had several sequels because of that, how well it was done. Not so good, but the original one was great. And though they have had multiple movies going on the same trope of some kind of possession or exorcism, like The Exorcist of Emily Rose, or American Exorcism, and what all the other ones are, it's a concept that continues because it makes money. People still want to go see it because it's a fear that they continue to have. Everyone can relate to that conceptual fear, where a traditional slasher one, which essentially Candyman is with the mythos of an urban legend added onto it. If you made Bloody Mary into, Freddy Krueger, that's what you get with Candyman. But, and don't get me wrong, both these movies are fantastic. If you guys haven't seen them, you should definitely go watch them.
Absolutely.
The last thing I want to end on is they continue to make movies, including the new one of The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, about to come out, dealing with an exorcism. But they keep making them because they make money. How much money did the new remake of Candyman make?
The one that comes out this year? That's
thought they
yet
came
to
out-
come out in
See-
it comes out in 4 months? The
I
one
was pretty sure that one
Ke-
came out last year, but okay.
the one by Jordan Peele?
He produced, he didn't make it, or didn't direct it.
Are you sure? I
No,
thought
he
he did.
produced it. But I thought that came out last year. That being said, we'll see how well that does. So,
It was at least written by Jordan Peele.
no. Anyhow, either which way,
But yeah,
I
it
hope
was
it does
directed
really
by
good.
someone else.
But they continue to make this because they make money. That's what I'm going to leave this off at. So now we leave it to you two.
I do have a question. I forgot. You said Candyman's based off of 2. What's
Yes.
the other one?
So
Is that
Bloody
the
Mary and the Hookman. The Hookman.
So
guy.
the Hookman
Yeah.
story,
I know
we
the
mentioned
Hookman.
earlier. Yeah.
I couldn't drive home in the dark for years. And is that the second movie?
That's both of those. So the Candyman has the hook hand, so that's what he kills people with.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it combines those two urban legends.
And bees. He kills people with bees.
Oh God, yeah. I was about
Yeah,
to ask.
there
It's
is
been
a bit of
long
that.
time since I've seen either one of these movies, but I'm like, where do the bees come in again?
That's how he was killed.
They chop his hand off. He was a slave that they chop his
So I
hand
mean,
off.
it's a combination of another one, right? The Wicker Man is thrown into Candyman too.
Kinda.
Oh, yeah, I guess a little bit.
But the Wicker
I think-
Man,
I think
the Wicker
Candyman was
Man's a
before the
little bit
Wicker
different.
Man, wasn't it?
No, the original Wicker Man was in like the 1960s.
Was it? Okay.
Dude, it had Saruman in it. What's his name? Christopher Lee. Christopher
Oh,
Lee
yeah.
was in the original one. That movie's amazing, but it's really hard to find.
Yes, it is. Most of the time when you look for Wicker Man, you get the Nicolas Cage, the one.
That movie is terrible.
Yes. All right, guys.
Do you want to start, Pat?
What's your back?
Pat?
She almost called me by my real name.
I know, I get confused when I read your name, and I'm like, who is this person? Sorry. Do you want me to start?
I mean, yeah, you can start.
Okay. I don't have time to think, sorry. Okay, point to each of you because I've seen neither one of these movies.
We're very brave.
I know. Good job, guys. So I do. You guys went really. I really did go back and forth on both of you. A lot with Brian because I have a very Hispanic Catholic grandma, and I 100%. You didn't play with the Ouija board. I own a Ouija board that I have never even like taken out of the plastic wrap because I just wanted it because it was Stranger Things Ouija board, and I cannot bring myself to play with it. Growing up, you couldn't play with a Ouija board. Even though I do not believe in Catholicism anymore, I will never, ever, ever, ever in my life touch a Ouija board because it opens a portal to hell. So I 100% believe these things. Also growing up, went to a Christian daycare. We played Bloody Mary in the bathroom at daycare all the time. And how you sorry, I don't remember who said it, like the innocence of going into playing Bloody Mary versus playing the Ouija board. Who said that? Sorry. Tom did. So like I give that to Tom because 100% unless you like understand what a Ouija board is, you have that innocence. Like you have no idea what you're doing with a Ouija board versus going in doing Bloody Mary.
But you did state just now that you did realize what you were doing because you're
I did because I grew up Catholic.
Yeah.
But the kids I was with at a Christian daycare, they weren't Catholic, they were Christian, or they weren't any religion. They had no idea what they were doing. Like legit, and part of me, I was very young. I was under the age of 8. I probably really didn't know what I was doing. But I think part of me knew what I was doing at the same time. So I'm very, I don't know, I think I need to hear what Pat has to say because I think I'm very.
Well, I mean,
50-50.
so
It's my
this whole
story,
thing,
yeah.
point of order here, like, what if Dani and I disagree?
Well,
That
I believe
means that-
Dani's at 50-50, so she'll probably just follow your lead.
I think so because I really, there were quite a few points that pulled me back and forth, and I really, I don't know right now.
So I would say my favorite movie, personally, among the two, is The Exorcist. But I'm kind of a sucker for exorcism movies. Like, I think exorcism movies are mostly successful because of people like me. I will watch every single Exorcist movie that I ever find out exists, right? But that's
Don't look at ones up on Pornhub.
No, those are the best ones.
Ew, you all are fired. God.
I mean,
Oh, that's horrible. Why? Why would that even be a
we're storyboarding an exorcism-based parody on my OnlyFans account.
I can't believe I'm the only one without an OnlyFans, guys.
Yes, you can find Pat's
least if
OnlyFans
you're
at
aware
Pat
of
a Pat on OnlyFans.
Mr. Patty Cakes.
Yes. Proceed.
Man, I don't know why I ever told you guys about that. In either case, I'm a sucker for Exorcist movies. Not because I'm actually afraid of them, but just because I don't know. It's something I find interesting. personally, I think that if I had to choose which of the types of stories is more scary in someone's daily life, it would have to be Candyman. And that's because, like, personally, I don't believe exorcism and demons and all that stuff is actually a thing. But Candyman's kind of a story that, a bunch of strange, unexplained murders happen around town, and I think, like, Candyman's basically like, there are a bunch of murders around Chicago. That may have actually happened, and the explanation they attribute to it is, Candyman. I suppose at a certain point you can't say that didn't happen. You can't prove that it wasn't Candyman that murdered all those people. So
We can't say it wasn't Jeffrey Dahmer either, but
I think it's true. Like, neither one of them actually scares me, but
I'm terrified of Jeffrey Dahmer, but he's dead, so.
you can't see it. But I'm just
I'm sure you've
Once
got
again,
the
you're the
worst.
webcam.
in my head.
Just the worst scowl ever, I'm sure.
I know, I felt it.
So you're 50-50 too?
No, I would lean very, very slightly towards Candyman.
Oh, okay.
All right, so you two are deciding
Hey.
on.
So my final thing is, I just have to say is, because when I was kind of looking up things, because my mom's a scary movie freak too, so I was talking to her about it, and she brought up the fact, and I'm kind of disappointed you didn't bring this up, Brian, that with The Exorcist, all the other crap happened while it was filming.
Yeah, I could have brought that up, but that takes away from the concept of the story to a movie. Like, I could have brought up all about the movie itself and all of the stuff that's happened. If you guys haven't looked it up, there are so many different things that happened during the making of that movie, including people dying before and before, during, and after the movie's creation and everything else. But it didn't feel like it was prominent to the concept of this, because what we're trying to do is the best story that the ghost story that became a movie, or urban legend that became a movie, not the movie itself.
I guess I wasn't sure 100% because we couldn't find what, because I knew Candyman, I knew the Bloody Mary part, I didn't know the Hook Man part, but we couldn't figure out what the Exorcist part, like what the actual urban legend was, so that's why I was like, was it all the crap that happened during the filming? So I think I'm still kind of torn, but I don't know, Pat, what? I think I have to go to Exorcist with your arguments.
Alrighty, so we have one on the Exorcist side and one on Candyman's side.
See? Here you go. What do we do with this now?
I thought I was the final judge.
Danny was meant to be the final judge, so if your final ruling is The Exorcist, then
yes, I think
you, Brian.
Although, like, just that slight point on the, I mean, I get where you're coming from because of the other stuff, but I guess I was just dead set on all the crap about what happened during making and after the film and everything.
Well, I think there's a thing to be said too. We might end up doing this as a future episode, talking about like the curses and horror movie stuff, or curses and scary stuff that happen during horror movies, like The Exorcist, like Poltergeist, like The Twilight Zone. There's tons of them over there, and that could be a future episode we can do. But I didn't feel like that worked for this episode. Which one? Twilight Zone?
Poltergeist is actually one of my favorite movies.
Yeah. Also based off of a true ghost story.
Yep.
So.
True.
True-ish. True. With that being said, guys, it sounds like we're throwing Pat's answers out the window. Sorry, Pat.
I appreciate you, Pat. No, I feel like I'm the real victor here, because Candyman vs. Exorcist, as movies go, yes, Exorcist is far more terrifying, but I feel like with my...
Also, I think Brian won because Tom did not tell me about this. Brian never tells me, but Tom didn't tell me until like an hour before. We'll blame it on that.
Oh, by the way, you're the judge.
To be fair, I've only got you on Facebook. He's got your direct cell phone number, so.
You have my cell phone number, jerk.
Oh, I do, don't I?
She's made you wrestling merchandise.
I forgot. Anyhow, that being said, though we asked Danny to be essentially the final judge and get input from Pat, and Pat has done a great job and his concepts and everything, so we don't want to belittle what Pat says. Thank you, Danny, for judging for us, and definitely thank you for going with Exorcism. But we're going to leave it to you guys as the true final judge. I want to hear your guys' thoughts and comments to figure out which one really is the best. In your opinion, which one of us told the better story, which one of us argued the best, and which one is the better movie.
And if you think that there is a better urban legend / ghost story turned to a movie, we want to hear about it. Tell us in the comments below, or you can hit us up on our Facebook, facebook.com/BeHeroMedia, or Instagram.com/BeHeroMedia.
Of course, right here on YouTube, hit the comments as well as hit that subscribe button, the little bell notification, tell you when we're on, and drop a new episode like this. Of course, you can also hit everything up on our Twitter, which is either Be Hero Media or Be Hero Fights, and everything that is Be Hero Media, everything that is Be Hero Media at BeHeroMedia.com.
That's right. We'd love to have you guys involved. If you guys want to get involved, if you think you can beat either of us in a debate, you've got no chance. But, well, you probably have a chance against Brian. But
you're probably right. But still,
If you want to get involved, you want to hit us up. We want to hear from you. We love you guys. Thank you so much.
All right, guys. Well, thank you guys so much. And join us next week for another great episode, as well as follow along with us here on our YouTube page, because you'll see our Heroes Play, the B reviews, everything else that we do here at Be Hero Media. And, of course, on podcast-wise, follow our Sheroes. They have some great episodes coming this month as well. So follow all of that. And lastly, guys, as always, fight on.
on.
All right, guys. Catch you next week.